Jesus. If you're new to the channel or a returning viewer or subscriber, thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'm not doing this for fame. I'm doing this to try to give back to the automotive community that has treated me so well over these last 20 plus years. It's been a long time. Particularly the racing community. I'm trying to show people that this is somewhat possible on your own. It does help to have help like I did at the racetrack, but in the shop here, kind of alone. But if you think somebody might be interested in what I do here, which is a lot of mechanical work, some amateur fabricating work and engineering, things like that, then send them my way. Again, I'm just doing this to maybe get enough subscribers that Google, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, maybe sends me a tire every once in a while. That would be great. Either way, there's a lot of work to do on this car. There's a ton. I mean, if you saw my last video where we went racing, you noticed that it hasn't really gotten better over the last, oh man, 2 years? Oh, that's not good. I know it really started to fall off last year, but it does not seem to be getting any better this year. We're going to find out if it's okay. You know, it could be the chassis. It could be what's bolted to the chassis. I've been chasing that for years now, and I'm really, really sick of not being successful anymore. So we're doing a deep dive. I've got 2 months before, well, a month and like 3 weeks before we go racing again. And I've got a bunch of stuff to go through, particularly the front end. This is a bump steer gauge that my brother bought me, which was super cool. It's got the dial calipers, it's got the stand, it's got the stands for the dial calipers that are adjustable, and you got the plate for the wheel that you bolt it onto. It's really heavy. Yeah, that's like 1/4 inch steel. And you stick that on there. It's got a little gauge to level it. That's perfect. So we're going to go through that. But there is a lot more to the front geometry than simply bump steer. I am absolutely not an expert in doing front end geometry on race cars, plainly, because obviously the results are kind of showing that. However, I was a mechanic on my brother's car for a long time before I started getting behind the wheel on my own. And so I'm, to be fair, not really that well read on setup. I mean, I can get you there, but a lot of times I'm really kind of far off of what I should have. And a lot of it makes mechanical sense, like from an engineering perspective, and just kind of common sense, and in a way. And I don't know, I just haven't done enough. I just haven't. I mean, I think the only reason I've really ever had success is talent, but even that's questionable. So we're going to show you what we're going to be going through in great detail. But again, I'm not an expert, and I absolutely am not going to call this a tutorial, because it's just not. This is me doing this, and I might be doing it wrong. We learn, and that's how we learn, is by doing. So this is what I'm working on today. Front geometry is key to how your race car works. Obviously, the car is way up in the air because I got my quick jacks under it, but all these arm angles don't look right because it's not on the ground. But there's also a bunch to be seen about, like steering and all this other stuff, like Ackerman, bump steer, caster camber toe, roll and moment centers. I mean, there's a lot of math, and let's be honest, I wouldn't have the job I have now if I actually did well in college, which I went there for engineering. And I'm clearly not an engineer. So I'm going to show you a few little things that I'm doing on the car without giving away what I've got or what I'm doing, because obviously there's so much speed in this car, I have to hide it. No, there's not. I'm kidding. So I'd really hate to make somebody else slow, but this is just kind of me chronicling doing front end geometry, like I said before. Now, what I did was I went through and I measured to see if the steering was square in the car, like the steering box was straight, like the pitman arm is straight back and the idler is straight back, and it's not like, and everything should be centered. Well, my wheels, if you look at them, are that way. So I don't think I ever actually like squared. Yep, that's that way. I don't think I ever squared the steering in the car when I initially did this. So I probably got unequal length tie rods, and the bump steer is not what I measured. And I don't have an adjustable center link, so everything has to be done with a torch or drilling holes or whatever the case may be. But this is going to be a freaking process, because now I've got to get the car back on pads, like to level it out. I got to put turning plates under it, which are hiding there. And I have to essentially string the car down the side. And then we can start actually measuring stuff from there. So I got her on my caster camber plates, and I just kind of eyeballed what I thought would be the right amount of steering angle that I thought would square off all the steering arms here. Pitman idler center, whatever. So I'm out of breath because I just squeezed myself from underneath this car. There's not a lot of room there. I got a pair of vice grips on the steering wheel because a buddy of mine told me that's how he locks his out, and that saved me a whole lot of time. And it turns out I nailed it. First try, just by eyeballing this. And so now I got the center link centered and all the arms square. So I look at the turning plates, and that's about 3 degrees turned out. Yeah, you can kind of see that. And on the right front here, yeah, it's about 3 degrees out or in. That one's 3 out. This one's 3 in. So they're both, yeah, to the left. So now I'm going to get my tow bars, and I'm going to try, just towing the thing straight. I'm going to write down all these things first, the stuff that I find. But then I'm going to tow it so that I probably set it to 0. I'm not sure what I should do, but I'm going to grab my tow bar at the trailer right here, set it to 0, because now I have to move all my tie rods this way to keep the steering nice and straight, and then we can check all our angles and bump steer and all this other fun stuff. I've got all sorts of problems here. I'm just trying to see if I can perfect a method. I got to cut another string so that I can go to the other side and parallel it off this one, but the problem is I'm on setup blocks, and my floor is not level, and none of these are the same height. So what I have to do is I have to get off the blocks, find the flattest, most level part of my garage, which there isn't one. This was literally not meant for cars. This was meant for parking your street car in, maybe, and a whole lot of lawnmowers and stuff, and then shutting the door. That was it. This was not meant to be a race shop. This was not meant to be a car garage. I just started doing that when I moved here. So I got to try to figure something out to string the car on the ground, but I need to have it on turning plates. So I think I'll just put it on the ground, put it on turning plates, cut a string so that I can go to the other side and use the jack stands that I have as wheel chocks to keep from running me over when I was adjusting tow. I think I'm just going to call it for tonight because I'm really getting frustrated by this. These cars aren't square either. The track width, front and back, are not the same. We achieved that by using wheel spacers because we don't run stock spindles, so the track width is different. So now I've got to get and measure front and rear track width, then see what spacers I have to figure that out, then try this again, not on these pads, so that the hub height and the string height can all be the same. And Jesus, this is what I need to be doing, but man, I've never been able to string a car in here, ever. Because every single time I do, I get different results. So I'm going to go do as much research as possible, and I guess we'll be back later. Back here in the shop again the day after, you can notice that it's actually on the ground now. I did put it on turning plates because I do have to make adjustments and stuff, but I do have it as, well, on as level a ground as I got, but that's about it. Even though absolutely nothing about this garage is level. And that really sucks because when you're trying to do this type of thing, you need level floor. I ain't got one. I got to talking with some people and I did some research online, all sorts of stuff. And I think we've all came to the same conclusion, and it's with the way these cars are, the front track width, like I'd mentioned already in the video, is typically wider than the rear, which is why we use spacers in the back, but you can't get it completely perfect because we use bigger spindles up front. That changes the pin width, stuff like that. There's minimum track width rules, and the front meets it, but the rear is usually a little bit less. So you're never going to square the car off the rear end. So what we thought of doing was we're going to drill holes in the side of the car about, I don't know, inch like that. And then I'm going to take some, I think I got it on the back there, some like 1/2-inch conduit. We're going to measure a nominal length from the frame out to where we will string it, because I don't know if I can get as far out as I want with how small a garage is. We're going to cut a piece longer than that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a slot, just a little tiny divot into the bar. Not all the way through, not halfway through, just a little kind of dot that we can use as a reference point so that when we string the car, we can run the strings from back to front. And of course, this is going to be well past me on both sides, and I can slide that rod in and hit the frame, and we can just measure where the string needs to go off of that instead of using a flimsy tape measure. It's literally just a tool for measuring consistent data points on the chassis. I figure we'll try that and see if that helps. So as you'll see, got us a line all the way down. Here's my tool I made. I measured it from 16 inches out of the frame because I can still measure off it, and it's going to give me room to at least try to hobble around it. I did so on the other side as well. I really got to be careful because I do not want to set this back up because this sucks. So what I did was, I don't think this is really going to be a precise measurement, obviously, but it's much easier than wrangling a tape measure. So what I did was I cut these holes into the chassis, and I looked down at that and square it off. Yeah, that looks like 16. So then I do it to all of them as I'm measuring and trying to straighten out the jacks and straighten out the line and make sure the line is pretty much parallel with the chassis. So I'll come back through one last time with an actual tape measure, and we will set it to that. Like I said, this is cut to 16 inches, and you can just kind of eyeball it or even touch it if you get it the right height. And every single corner is going to set it up exactly the same, so you have the exact same distance all the way around on all 4 points. Then I'll check it with a tape measure. I'm really doing my best here, really trying. I can get the strings to be about level with the frame rails. I can get them to be equidistant from the frame rail at 16 inches or whatever I made it. What's interesting is I did it to that side, and the left rear is pretty much square. I know that there's going to be a little bit of a hint of a difference because this thing is set to ride height. And in these cars, depending on if you pick one side up or the other, it could move the rear end front to back. That's factored in. Right rear is like a 16th toed out. But again, that could be ride heights. When the car rolls, I bet it doesn't have 16th of toe out. That might be okay. Right front, after I centered the steering, like I said before, and last night, I centered the steering the same way, and I just kind of turned a bunch of toe because I could visibly see that the car was pointed left a lot, like at least 3 degrees on the turn plates. So I did it, and then today I put the car on the ground, recentered it, put 2 vice grips on the steering shaft to make sure that will not move from square, lowered it gently onto the turning plates, pulled the pins in the turning plates, and then strung the car. It was still towed left 5/8 of an inch. Now it's sitting parallel to whatever the chassis is, even if the chassis is straight or not. This looks like it's dead nuts. So now that the car seems to be aligned, I'm going to read up about how to measure wheelbase, because I know you can do that by stringing the car, but I don't know how. I'm going to have to read up on that. But now it seems like the car is actually rather square, to be fair, and it's actually straight. The tires are straight. So, well, we didn't get a heck of a lot done, but we did learn a lot today. And I'm kind of figuring out that if you string your race car, you kind of have to have faith that the center section is straight. And I'm not too keen that mine actually is, but there's not a heck of a lot I can really do about that either. So I remember when I put this rear clip on, I measured those factory datum points. Like I measured the right front to the left rear and the left front to the right rear. And I mean, the measure came out the same, and it came out exactly to the number of factory. So I don't know. The only real telling thing that I figured out today was, based solely off of the measurements from the chassis to the string to make it straight, the rear seems to be pretty straight in the car. So that's job one, that's done. Again, the ride heights might be setting off the right side a little bit on their height, because again, 4 links can pull the thing around and change your alignment a little bit. The most telling thing was squaring the front end. I have never squared the front end. I rarely have ever done geometry either. I mean, I was never the setup guy. Like I said, I knew a little bit about it, and I tried to experiment sometimes, and it seemed to work out before, or I was just really stupidly lucky. This time, we're actually going to go by the book instead of trying things. Now, like I said, the most telling thing I did was when I squared the steering arms in the car, the tires were way off to the left. Way off. By like maybe inches to the left. So now that the car is strung, I've got everything set to the rear. It seems to be straight with the rear. I got front and rear tires and the chassis all set in one line. Everything is now completely straight and aligned. I guarantee the steering wheel is going to be off in the car now. It doesn't really matter to me. I just grab the wheel in front of me and go. But tomorrow I think we're going to start measuring where the lower control arms sit, and we're going to start putting it in the air and working bump steer. Haven't done that in a long time, but I'm ready for the experience and all the experimentation that goes with it. So I'm also interested in what the numbers are going to be. So instead of continuing to talk, I'll see you tomorrow. Next day, we're back in the shop. I just realized I haven't really been filming like any of the work that I've been doing. Usually I throw you guys on like a time lapse or something, but I think I'm forgetting to, so sorry about that. Either way, the agenda for today is I'm probably going to take the string up, pull that away from the car. We're going to measure the A-frames from a point where I'm going to pick straight down at ride height. That way, when we put it in the air to check the bump steer, we're going to have a data point from those 2 points so that I can have it at ride height and then compress it. I think it's up to 3 inches, like 1 inch at a time, and check the bump steer with the gauge like that. So first things first, we're going to measure, then we're going to, well, pull the strings up, then measure, then put it in the air, take all the springs and shocks out of it, all that stuff. Does that become your drawing board?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm back to the drawing board on that too. problem. Obviously, I run all stock stuff, so you ain't gonna learn no tricks from me. Plus, be fair, if you saw my last video, you ain't learning nothing from somebody who's slow. So this is my new problem. Now, keep in mind, the steering shaft is locked out still. It cannot move. Uh-oh. We got bigger problems here. Guys, we just got stopped completely dead in our tracks. There should be nowhere even close to the amount of play that's in that thing as there is right there. Like I said, I'll show you exactly how I have this thing locked off, because this thing, look at 2 vice grips holding the steering shaft. You absolutely cannot move the wheel. When I move the wheel back and forth, the shaft is not turning, but the whole steering can move by about that much. I mean, that's just completely derailed us. So, I'm not going to be ending this video with doing all the geometry work to this car because, well, how can we do it with a, I don't know, worn out steering gear? I mean, this thing I would never have known, because typically when I'm working on the car, we don't have the steering shaft locked off. We usually have it on caster camber toe plates or on scales or whatever. And if I bump into the steering, it's me doing something or working on it. So I just kind of figure that, you know, maybe I bumped the tie rods and they moved over, or, you know, we turned and moved the toe around or something. But that's seemingly not the case. I mean, we got 2 to 4 degrees of slop in the steering that I didn't know about. I mean, I put this box in the car in 16 or 17. I can't remember what year it was, but I mean, I'm thinking about it and I'm like, yeah, it's a race car. It does get hit in the wheels every once in a while, and I probably should have had it sent out to have it looked at before, but street stock, I don't know these things. So it is an aftermarket box, and I can send it back to the company and have them look at it. And I don't know, I'm just wondering what happened, because man, it makes a lot of sense, because yeah, I mean, it's like I mentioned before, it's a race car. It gets hit in the wheels a lot. I'm sure it probably messed up one of the bushings in the steering gear, and now there's all sorts of slop in it and stuff. And man, it's just, it explains a lot. Doesn't explain everything, obviously. We're not going to make up 8/10 because of that, but I mean, I'm looking at like where Ackerman placement is and bump steer and all this other stuff, and I'm like, I haven't taken enough care of this car for the last 5+ years, man, and it's just not good, and I'm not happy at all. And I was going to end the video off there, but we do have a few things that we have to take care of. There's some oil leaks and some other stuff that we got to address, so I'll at least get to do that real quick. But the box has to come out. It's got to go back, because that is not good. That's really not good. Well, we made a good attempt at trying to stop any oil leaks from happening. I even pulled the fuel pump off because it looked like it was wet around the gasket. And I keep seeing people on YouTube say, oh, well, RTV is there just to help the gasket. Let me tell you something. The only gaskets I've ever put on anything is an oil filter and an intake manifold and an oil pan. That's it. That's the only gaskets I ever put on anything. Water pump, RTV. Fuel pump, RTV. Headers, high temp RTV. Transmission case, all RTV. Rear end, RTV. It's fine. Either way, unfortunately, that's going to have to do it for this video because, well, unforeseen circumstances, I guess you can call it. So I'm going to have to get in contact with that company, get the steering box out, see if they'll rebuild it, which I'm sure they will. It's just a matter of time, but I'm not sure if I should buy a second one just in case. I don't really know. Rock Auto sells like 10 to 1, I guess, if you really want to get racy or whatever, but who knows? So either way, I'm sorry for the shorter video, but you got a longer one with the race video. And this is the stuff that happens when you're working on race cars and stuff in your shop on your own. You're trying to learn stuff. Things just come up out of the ordinary, you know, and out of the blue, and you got to deal with it. And that stinks, but that's just how this is, and that's just how it's always ever going to be. So thank you all again for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and hopefully we get back onto this thing as soon as possible. But please subscribe if you haven't already. Tell your friends if you think they'd like a whole lot of failure and a whole lot of learning at the same time. But either way, until next time.